All right. A couple of things. What we're going to be doing is we've got a few speakers who are going to come up and kind of give their thoughts and remembrances of Brad's influence in their life, as well as things that they've worked with him on, or any personal anecdotes. And then after that, we're going to have time when it's kind of a social piece where people can congregate like we were doing before, kind of share memories as well as sign any of the cards that we have here. So, oh, yes. There's a story behind that one, but we'll talk about that later. So starting off, I'm glad everybody got to think about the dress code, because I don't think Brad could spell suit or tie, and I know he never wore them, so I think I sold his sock twice that he had on. So it's great to see everybody come out here and support. For those who don't know me, my name is Mike Butler. Not very many people are able to have a friend of 45 years. I was privileged to be able to do that with Brad. We met on the playground when he had some old coins, and he wanted to show me these coins. And you know, when you're 5, that makes a friendship, right? So, but we really had our lives, both professional and personal lives, entwined through the last 45 years, through high school, junior high. 3 different companies that he dragged me along into, marriages, children, lots of concerts. I don't even know how many times we've gone to see Dream Theater and Fix Morning together. Games, we had a weekly Magic game that had been going on for, well, I think since '94. It was a Friday night. And often we would have people that would come in and say, hey, so-and-so is joining the game. I met him at the game store, and he's pretty cool. And that person ended up being here in the games for 10 years. We've got a couple of them here, so which is great. We all know that Brad had a lot of passions in his life. He loved cars, well, mainly fast cars, motorcycles, dirt bikes, 1990s Japanese bikes as well, street bikes. Music, he liked progressive metal, symphonic metal, power metal, and a bunch of subgenres I have no idea about, because he would push these on me, but I didn't know all of them. But some of the biggest passions he had was really making games and his faith. So I want to talk a little bit about some of that mainly. So growing up, as I said, he was always making games. He and I were always making games. In fact, he made a war game out of paper where he cut out little boats and planes, and he had a whole rule set for what could hit what, and we did that. We had detailed instructions on building Lego starships, and you had to follow it exactly. And then don't ask about the guinea pig prison. So we won't go about that. I think his mom knows a little bit about what things we did with that. So, you know, one of the things he told me several times was, I don't know what I'd be doing if I couldn't make games. And I think he sold himself short of that, because he was extremely talented in everything he did. But he could be doing something else, and he would still make games because it was his passion. But I think there's a few people here in the room that have played games with him and know that while he can make games, he doesn't play very good. I mean, I don't think I can remember. Well, I think it was 6 months ago he won a Magic game. Is that not right, Sean? Yeah. And EQ, I equipped him probably 3 or 4 times with full sets of Rubicite and everything else, because he would just, I died and I didn't know where my corpse was. So, yeah, he was never the best game player with that. But we won't hold that against him. You know, I think that with these passions, he was also it was an infectious passion. I think there's probably a few people in this room who have made purchases, either bad or good, based on his passion. I can attest. I got scars for that. Bought a motorcycle and crashed and surgery, so that was always fun. So, you know, but the biggest thing that he had, I wanted as a takeaway, was, you know, Brad had his faith, and that was one of the things that defined who he was, and defined in his games even that I saw. It influenced everything in how he approached life. He knew that he was a work in progress, but he also knew what grace was, and he knew that it was going to be a continued thing through life, that he would have to build that relationship, and that was one of the things that he would talk to people about. He would talk to people about his faith, but only if they really seemed like they were interested. Other than, well, I did hear one story about he had somebody in his car, and they were going up Palomar Mountain, around the roads, and he said something like, "So, what do you know about Jesus?" So I don't know if that was, we're going to go over the side, or... So I wasn't really sure how that worked out. But you know, the last thing I want to leave with is there's so many people in this room that got their start in the industry because Brad saw something of himself in them, that they had a desire to make a game, that they could do something, even if they didn't have the experience. But there's a lot of people who, he just saw that. He could see that passion that we all had for what we do. So the games that he worked on, they're going to live on. I mean, we've got EverQuest is going on 21 years. We've got Pantheon that we're still working on. But I think the biggest legacy we're going to see really is the lives that he touched and those personal relationships and the mentoring that he did. There's several people that he took aside and worked with them to make them better at design or whatever it was. But it was such a privilege to have him as a best friend for 45 years. So next we're going to have Julia, I think. Did you want to say something? So this is Julia, Brad's daughter.
Hi, everyone. So I just wrote out a little speech that I'm going to read to you guys. It's kind of short, but that's what I got. Right. It was my dad's cherished connection to his child self, the access he had to the other worlds inside his mind, and the understanding of how uniquely loved and capable we all are of telling our own stories that molded him into the person he become. Ever since I could walk, my dad wanted to share his love of learning with me. We would spend hours into the night watching History Channel documentaries, often pausing to discuss any questions I had. He'd make rules like, as long as you're reading, you're allowed to stay up as long as you want. This included comic books too. He shared books that later became some of my favorites with me. I was taught an insatiable inquisitiveness and the importance of growing from our past selves, no matter how old we are. My father always encouraged my art and pushed me to continue creating. Above all else, loving others unconditionally was something instilled at a very young age. The creativity my dad had ever since he was a child was encouraged by my grandparents, who provided him with books that captured his imagination. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, The Hobbit, and A Wizard of Earthsea, among others. At 10, he was studying U.S. naval ships and created intricate replicas out of printer paper. My grandma would often open the door to Dad cross-legged on the floor, orchestrating his fierce armada. Later on in his high school days, he filled folders with code, sketches, and stories of a green armored ranger. Even as he was made fun of by peers and doubted by others at school and into his young adulthood, Dad always trusted the voice, pushing him into deeper realms. Something I loved the most about my dad was that he respected and nurtured his inner child. He didn't look down on children for their naivety, but instead looked up to them for their innate capacity to dream, their ability to live in the moment and just enjoy the ride. My dad always saw the light in people. He empowered the misfits and was firmly grounded in the belief that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Despite my dad's outward success and accomplishments, he always said, with tears forming in his eyes, that his biggest achievements were realized by the stories he received from EverQuest players. That paralyzed war veterans could finally run again. Kids stuck in abusive homes could find refuge. In-game, no one was orphaned or homeless, and countless friendships and marriages were kindled. This is truly what he believed his calling was. It still feels like he's here, and while a part of me breaks knowing I won't see him again in this life, I know he's waiting for me in the next one. And he lives through me, just like he lives through you and the memories we carry. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me okay?
No.
I'm not big on microphones. I'm Chris Rowan. I'm CEO of Visionary Realms. We're making Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. It's the game that Brad and myself and several people in this room have been working on over the last several years. I met Brad first in about 1996 or 97. I was over from Japan visiting, and people were drawing dungeons on graph paper as EverQuest this school. And we worked together with some of the Sony folks, bringing some games over to Japan. Got to know Brad later, got to know Brad better at SIGIL, and now we're working to bring his dream to reality in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. I want to thank the industry for all of the outpouring of support that we've received. It's been absolutely amazing, and we think of ourselves as keeper of Brad's vision for Pantheon. We respect the dream, we respect the vision, and we want to bring it to reality. We hope you can join us in fulfilling that vision. Gone but forgotten is a common refrain when somebody passes. But I'm not sure it applies here. For me, Brad isn't gone. He touched people so deeply. He accomplished so much. He impacted so many lives that to me, it feels like he's still here. That's quite an accomplishment for an introvert. I don't know if everybody knows this, but Brad was quite the introvert. And he would be at conventions talking to people about Pantheon. But he couldn't hold back his passion. His passion would defeat his introvert nature. But it drained him. But he was so passionate, he would press on. Sometimes with the help of sugar and caffeine, of course. There was so much sacrifice for the passion because it really did drain him. But he kept on. Brad was an unstoppable force. He was kind of a tidal wave of passion. And for some of the geekier people in the room, Linda over here once described Brad's Dungeons and Dragons alignment as chaotic good. There was a chaotic side to him, and it was wonderful. But he always wanted people to come along for the ride on that tidal wave. Always join him in his endeavors, as Mike spoke to. Whether it was riding motorcycles, shooting, playing Magic the Gathering, music, making video games, Brad wanted everybody in on the fun. And I got dragged along too. It was this spirit of inclusion that I believe bore the common refrain that I've heard over the past several weeks. Brad gave me a chance. I keep hearing this over and over. Brad often confided in me that first and foremost, his marriage and his daughter, Julia, were the greatest pride in his life. But after that, he was fostering talent, giving people a chance. And he pointed to two examples as sources of deep pride. One of them's in this room, Bill Fisher. Brad brought Bill onto EverQuest when Bill was barely an adult. And Bill went on, according to Brad, and it's true, to be one of the best producers and game designers in the industry. And Brad's pride over that Bill. We talked about it all the time. The other is Chris Perkins, another person we gave a chance to. Chris is the creative director at Visionary Realms. He's blossomed into an amazing game designer. Brad never really mentioned his own accomplishments. It was all about other people and enabling other people to succeed. And that always impressed me. So in the spirit of giving people a chance, a scholarship has been set up at the Luna College of Art and Design to give students a chance. And it's listed in the program, and hopefully everybody can take a look at it and consider helping that scholarship grow. So if you'll hear me for just a moment longer, I want to finish with some words from another creator of worlds, J.R.R. Tolkien. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road is gone, and I must follow, if I can, pursuing it with eager feet until it joins some larger world, where many paths and irons meet. The road goes ever on and on, out from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road is gone, let others follow if they can. Let them a journey begin, but I, at last, with weary feet, will turn towards the way within, my evening rest and sleep.
So, I'm John Smedley. I think most of you guys know me. First of all, I want to say thanks for all of you to come out like this. To me, it's especially important for Julia here to know just how much her dad meant to all of us. I got to meet your dad in 1996. It was a pretty boring meeting for the first one. I checked out War Wizard, and I was like, this is cool. We need some people with some passion like this. And I asked Brad for a meeting, and he came in with Steve. But Brad did all the talking. That was pretty much universally true no matter the situation. But he was ridiculously passionate about this game that he wanted to make. And I knew that we wanted to make an online game, but I didn't really have a whole lot more ideas than just some basic D&D. Brad came in with the ideas. Brad was a creator, and I'm going to miss that about him a lot, because he brought a lot of joy to a whole lot of people out here. Not just the people in this room, but millions of people worldwide got to play something that Brad had a very, very big hand in making. And I think, aside from his family, which is easily the thing that he's the most proud of, I think that the joy of bringing people together is the thing that defined Brad. Whether it was magic, I too learned magic from Brad. I too beat his ass on a regular basis. He was pretty good at it. I actually traded Brad some magic cards for a motorcycle that I rode twice. But I distinctly remember going with Brad to the motorcycle dealer, and I don't know squat about motorcycles. I should never have been on one. And he's got to know his limitations. And that's one of mine. But what Brad did was try to teach me about every single thing about this motorcycle. Boring stuff, I didn't care. 2-stroke, 4-stroke, 5-stroke, I don't know. What was really cool to me, though, was the time that he took with his friend to try and share a joy that he had. And that's the thing that was a consistent theme in his life. And I loved about him. The fact that he still had regular magic games. The fact that he had this group of friends that he'd known for 20 years, if not longer in Mike's case and others. It really is a testament to the man that we all know, because that bringing together, it just was there in everything he did, whether it was his passion for Christ. He was a very strong Christian, and he evangelized a lot. It's funny, when Chris was, or maybe it was Mike, was telling the story about Brad and the Jesus thing. I can remember, long conversations with Brad about God, and I was Catholic, and he was telling me about his faith. He shared it, but he did it in a way that made everybody feel welcome and never made you feel like you were, not part of the club. And I always liked that about Brad. He was very strongly opinionated. I think most of the people in this room would agree with that. We had all kinds of knockdown dragouts over many things in EverQuest, and your dad won almost every single one of those. Pretty much every one of those, actually. EverQuest is the game that he wanted it to be, and I think it's still the game that he wanted it to be. And to me, that's just a testament to the force of his creative ability. He knew the kind of thing that brings people together. That's what EverQuest was to him. And for me, I'm always going to be honored to have been, just to know him and to be a part of his world. It wasn't always easy. He could be a stubborn guy, but that stubbornness is actually the very thing that I think made him one of the best at what he does. So I'm very much going to miss him. I'd like to read, if you don't mind, Kelly Flock gave me something that he asked me to read. He apologizes for not being able to be here. Those of you that don't know Kelly, he ran SOE for a while, right around the time when EverQuest was launched. And he asked me to read this. I'm going to read the bottom part about it. So, the day Brad McQuaid joined the studio at what was then Sony Interactive Studios America, the company changed. John and I had discussed strategy for the PC division and had already had a green light for our first online game, which became EverQuest. So, John proposed that we begin developing an online fantasy game. It wasn't yet a separate genre in itself, and no one inside SCPA actually was for that, which is true. It's pretty amazing the game even got made. A lot of that's because of Brad. For that matter, no major publisher thought much of anything online only, massively multiplayer, God forbid, 3D only, too. All those things were all the things that were going up against us. But when you initiated EverQuest and hired Brad to lead it, Ultima Online was in production at that time. It was kind of the only big thing out there. And it launched while we were all playing our Magic games, and we played the heck out of it. Now, years later, and after several corporate shufflings, EQ was released in '99. The PlayStation company, with the PC studio spinning off as VERANT, under Brad and myself and some of the others in this room, became very successful. In all this big conglomerate madness, Brad stayed focused on expanding and improving EverQuest as the preeminent MMORPG in the world. There's industry-wide acknowledgement that EQ fundamentally changed interactive gaming. The hundreds of new developers that came through EQ, VERANT, and SOE, and later SIGIL under Brad, now populate companies throughout the world. And this is just one of the legacies that Brad has left behind. Few game designers can equal the mark that Brad made in games. And though we will no longer benefit from his vision and membership today, we celebrate the passing of an industry icon who left us all too soon. Farewell, Aradune. Anyways, I want to say thank you guys again for all coming out, and I really appreciate your time putting this together and show in mind.
So I'm Bill Fisher, and I'm extremely bad at public speaking, so I apologize. These are a couple of the stories that I have about Brad. I hope I don't bust through tears, because practicing this twice I did. I was about 14 or 15 years old when I met a ranger named Aradune in the lands of Code. I'm 40. It's a long time. We fought Jubilix and Demogorgon in the astral plane. Braved the lands of Jotunheim and seized the throne of Utgard Loki. We beat back the Fire Giants' invasion, and we bested Tiamat in her lair. I remember talking at one point about how work was really busy. He didn't think he's going to be around much anymore. He was working on a graphical mud in EverQuest. I used to dream in text, and I remember thinking, why would you ever need a graphical mud? What's the point? I literally dreamed in text. A few years later, I was at a game store with my brother. My older brother never understood my budding addiction. He just didn't get it. He didn't understand why someone could play in an online world. And we saw EverQuest on the shelf. And I said to him, hey, I know a couple of guys that work on that. He said, to my surprise, huge surprise, let's pick it up, let's try it out. And we did. So, we hopped into the lands of EverQuest, and I reconnected with an old friend of mine. She was actually one of the first guides in EverQuest, and she played Turtle with us. She said, hey, come play on Vishon. Aradune's here. He's under a different name, but come play with us. Let's all play together. And we had a little guild there, and I reconnected with some other friends from Turtle Mud. And Brad introduced me to a human wizard and a dwarven cleric that were real life friends of his. That was Mike Butler and Dave Gilbertson. It was a really fun time. I remember in those early days at EverQuest, we were very low level, and we journeyed from Keynotes to Freeport as a guild. All maybe level 10 or 15 rank, It was pretty crazy. You know, we went through the Quranas, dodging all that stuff. Really traumatic stuff in the Gorge of Kingsor. But I'm pretty sure somebody in this room might have, done Ions on and maybe a couple trains happened. Somebody got charmed. Might have had Brad a few times. We finally reached, the common lands and the relative safety of Freeport, and that was an epic journey. Only in EverQuest could you have a journey, that sort of experience. I mean, it was right on board the rings for me. It was real. Our little guild spent hundreds of hours playing together, leveling up, gaining loot, and chatting about life, the universe, and everything else. I got to meet Brad in real life back in 2000. I ultimately got a chance to work on EverQuest because of my dream job. I think a lot of people's dream job. He wanted to take a chance on a kid that played the hell out of his game, and they came from that same mining background. It was 2002, and I remember having a really surreal conversation with Brad. He was naming his new company. He named it SIGIL. He asked me for permission to do that. The reason he did that was my character in EverQuest last name was SIGIL. It was an homage to our guild on Tormund. It was in honor of the Crimson Sigil that Brad wanted to name that company, and he did. During our time at SIGIL, Brad and I became much closer friends. Through trial and tribulation, I would say we really became more like brothers. As anyone with a brother knows, there are good times and there are bad times. He taught me how to drive stick shift on his S2000. I remember distinctly failing to get into gear 4 times. And then, Brad's looking at me like I'm the biggest idiot in the world. He had the amazing superpower he could do. And then him looking down and realizing he never told me to take the parking brake off. That was a little bit of a, oh, sorry, my bad moment from Brad. Which did happen from him. He could be wrong. He often didn't want to admit it, but he did. He had me over to watch Smallville and other TV shows with his family almost every week during those years. We played Magic the Gathering at least once a week. And for those of you that don't know, this wasn't your run-of-the-mill dueling Magic the Gathering. This was 5+ players, no old bars Magic the Gathering. This was something else. This was about playing with friends, politicking, and community. I think a lot of you know those sorts of ideals from Brad's game design. And it really showed through just how he played games and shared games with other people. When I moved to San Diego, I had a Dodge Aries K. It was gold. It was an absolute piece of garbage. It's not the sort of car that Brad liked. I remember how giddy he was when my car finally died. He was so thrilled. He convinced me to buy an RSX Type S because he loved the legacy of the Integra and everything else. And he'd had one, and Milo had had one back in the day before the rebranding. He helped me negotiate with the sales guy. We even walked off the lot from the sales guy, typical used car guy. Actually, it wasn't used, it was a new car. I literally had no credit. I was 21, 22 maybe at the time. And I'm not supposed to tell your mom this, but your dad co-signed for that car. I would get things that say Brad D. McQuaid on my payment that I had to say. Thankfully, I never missed a payment. So. Comic-Con with Brad was something else. He loved to collect comics and so many other things. If you've ever seen his collections, they're a sight to behold. One of the last times I visited him, he took me into the garage and he said, "I promise I'm not crazy, this isn't all mine." And he showed me all of the motorbikes in there. Thankfully, they weren't all his, because that was a crazy amount of motorbikes. But Comic-Con was really amazing with Brad. His enthusiasm was powerful. He gets so excited about adding something new to his collection. We once got to attend Comic-Con with Jim Lee, the comic book artist, who Brad really liked his art and became a good friend of. But to us, he was just Jim. We played on the Fairy V special rule set server with Jim, my brother, and Brad, and a few other folks. But that Comic-Con was surreal because, again, he was just Jim to us. But Jim Lee shows up with an entourage of like 20 or 30 people. He was the true rock star of the event. And I can't be 100% certain about this or not, but we were in the Gaslamp, dance club, and there's a line around the block. pretty sure Jim slipped the guy $1,000 and got all of us into this dance club. Now, you don't need to imagine Brad dancing in a dance club because it didn't happen. We went into the dance club and we sat on our hands and he talked about his wife. That's what happened in that dance club. It was a crazy time. If you can find a copy of the Batman Hush story that Jim did, you'll find a pair of helicopter pilots in it. One of those pilots is named McQuaid, after Brad, and the other is named Henry, after my brother, who played with Brad. If it wasn't for Brad, I might not actually be alive today. I got a terrible case of food poisoning sometime in 2002 or 2003. I couldn't walk. I called Brad and he showed up at my house. He took me to the emergency room and they found out I'd lost 25 or 30 pounds of water weight. I would probably die the next day or two if I hadn't reached out and he hadn't come and checked up on me. Over the last year, I had a chance to reconnect with Brad on a few occasions. I live far away from here now. I haven't been a big part of his life for a while. But we went out for Indian food, which, back in the SIGIL days, he really wasn't brave enough to try. He made fun of me for liking it back then. I took him out to see the new Hellboy movie one of those days, and it was bad. The theater wasn't crowded. And we sat there cracking jokes like it was Mystery Science Theater 3000. We hadn't seen each other in years, and it was just a connection again, just like that. I remember the way his eyes lit up that night, too, when I told him I hadn't seen Sicario, which was one of his favorite movies. I found out that day. We stayed up until I think 2 or 3 in the morning, watching that movie and talking about it. And then we talked about life and parenting. We're both the fathers of daughters. Talked about how proud he was of his daughter and how lucky he was to have married the absolute love of his life, his true soulmate. Brad gave me a ton of great opportunities and amazing, life-changing opportunities. His work affected millions of lives. He helped create worlds and he loved his family. The world has lost a good man. His family has lost a husband, a father, and a son. And I have lost a brother.
That's a tough one to follow. Very well said, obviously. And as far as grading on public speaking, I'd say pretty good. As I listened to Mike and Smith and everyone talk about how much you kicked Brad's butt, I can't help but remember that I don't think we understood the game. Sure, we beat Brad all the time, but what I don't think we all realized was that the game was bringing us in. The game was getting us to come play. The game was making a world, as Julia said, that everyone can come to. That was the game to him. So he won before the first card was put on the table. So I was just thinking of that. I had to say that out loud. I like to hear my own voice. The first time that I met Brad, because you meet Brad 2 or 3 times. You meet him in the game, and then you meet him out of the game, right? You meet the person that he is inside the game, and then you get to meet him live, right? And sometimes those are 2 different people. The first time I met Brad was in EverQuest Beta. It was on the boat from Freeport to Keynote. Several of you know how the story ends, I think, already, right? So we're on the boat. I was a guide at the time. I was one of the early generations of guides. I won't say how old. But a big problem was the boat sinking constantly, and in amazing and hilarious ways, leaving players in an unbelievable number of different states when it happened. So I'm on the boat. Brad appears, obviously in the green with the flaming sword. I'm starstruck immediately. Let me rewind a little bit. Smith talked about UO. I played the crap out of UO. I played an embarrassing amount of UO. But there was a point at UO where the server problems that they were having and the technical problems that they were having caused it to start to fail. Like it just really didn't support players anymore. And at the same time, they decided to shut up. They decided to not talk to their players. At that time, Brad was everywhere. Brad was on every message board talking about EverQuest. He was already trying to get people into his world before it even existed. That's what got the attention of Jeff. That's certainly what got the attention of me. And he was always there. He was always talking up the game and what it was going to be. It was D&D in 3D. Like, it sounded like a miracle. And at the same time that this one company is giving us no word at all, here comes this tiny, relatively tiny company that says they're about to give us the Holy Grail. So Jeff can attest to just how excited I was to get into that beta. And here on this boat with me was the guy who started this all. Was effectively the lord over this entire land that we were all going to play, the DM, if you will. So the first question I asked him, stupidly, is, do you think the boats are fixed? It wasn't 60 frames later that the boat went under, with both of us on it. And it was that point that I heard Brad's first words, which were, nope. That was my first introduction to Brad. But from that point on, I just wanted so much to work for that company. As much as I wanted to be in the beta, which again, Jeff will tell you just how desperate I was to get into that beta, I had to work for SOE. I had to work on this game. I had to be in Brad's world. So I came out as quickly as I could to California to interview, and I met Brad face to face. We conversed for all of a minute and a half. They were working on Cunard at the time, and everyone was busy. So Brad said, all right, seems pretty cool. Jeff speaks highly of you. You need to go speak to Brian Hook. So that's what I did. I went and had my first interview at SOE with Brian Hook, who hated me with a passion that was palpable. You could taste it in the air. So needless to say, I didn't get the job. I went back home empty-handed, heartbroken, ... It wasn't 9 months later that that person wasn't in the picture anymore. I'll say it nicely. And I got another interview, which obviously, unfortunately for SMED, I passed. And got a job working and got to spend a decent amount of time with Brad then. By then, I was still spending embarrassing amounts of time in beta while also working on my other pursuits and trying to fix every bug I could, trying to help the artists out with pipelines at the time. We were constantly adding chicken wire and Bondo to keep things going, to keep the content pipeline for EverQuest moving forward. It was a strain at times. There was a point at which, for whatever reason, maybe it was bad judgment on his part, but I started getting into the inner circle of going to shows with Brad and Jeff and other guys. And an amazing thing about Brad that I think most of you know, maybe not all of you, is just how humble he is in public. At a time when game developers were rock stars, that may not seem like it now, but there was certainly a time when most of your Carmacks and your Sweeneys and those guys were certainly Cliff Lisinski, were effectively rock stars. In fact, I think at the time there was a magazine article about rock stars in video games. Brad did not take on that persona. He was very humble. When fans would come up to him and talk about their druid, he took it. He was interested. He opened his eyes. He listened to him. He was attentive. He never stopped at, I want to bring you into my world. And if you're in my world, I want you to stay there. I want you to feel like you're a part of the story that I'm trying to tell. So that was amazing to me. That was amazing to me. At a time when he certainly could have been a lord over these fans, he was actually very, very humble and very kind to them. I could talk for hours on just that point alone because it's something that I really respected about Brad. So moving forward to the SIGIL days. Again, Brad had an opportunity to create yet another world. He grabbed people like David Gilbertson, Jeff, myself, obviously Bill, Keith Parkinson, and several other people, and started to build an entire new world from scratch. I can remember endless meetings of who are the gods of this world, who are the heroes of this world, what is this world all about? And again, those were the times that that Brad got incredibly excited about bringing everyone into yet another game. I mean, you could just watch him turn 11 years old with those boats, playing all sorts of games. Except now the stakes were higher. Obviously, we had Microsoft wanting us to not just play games. So, what is Brad's legacy? What did Brad teach us? We haven't used the word vision yet, but I think the passion and the vision that Brad showed is something that I think he would like us to all carry forward. Something that I think he would like us to all have in our lives. Brad took the passion, which almost everyone that worked with him had, and he added that vision. As Smed might call it an argument at times, because it certainly was. The vision turned into lots of arguments. But having that vision and sticking with it and being diligent and saying this is how it has to be, and getting other people to unite around that vision is a quality I think you would love us all to work on, all to have. So the other thing is, again, Brad's ability to bring people together and mentor them, taking people that are young, or at least were young 15, 20 years ago, and seeing that hope, that desire, that passion in them, seeing their capabilities from that early age and training it up. I have a list here of just a few of the companies that now enjoy employees at high levels that all came from SIGIL and EverQuest. We're looking at Ubisoft, EA, Blizzard, Namco, Nintendo, Microsoft, Sony, Riot, ArenaNet, Disney, Google, NVIDIA. I could go on and on and on and on. Name a big company. It's actually 8 of the top 10 game companies have people that started from Brad McQuaid. And I'm not just talking about entry-level people. We're talking about the leaders in these companies, the people who are making the next generation of game, the people that are making the next world that's going to invite other people to join. What better legacy could he have than training other people to now make worlds that they can bring the next generation into? I know he'd be super happy about that. And I want to leave with a couple of things I used to sign my posts with that are still true. In the early days of beta, when things were really rough, when Smed and Brad not only were having to deal with making a game, but were having to deal with keeping the game afloat, not to do a call back to the boats, I would often sign my post, "Keep the faith," and that was something that I said to a lot of the guys in the day, and sometimes said to the programmers when they were lamenting the situation that they were in. And then after EverQuest shipped, for the longest time I kept my signature as still a fan, and that's true even today. I remain a fan of who Brad stood for, what he stood for, and what he gave to me. So thank you guys.
Hi everyone, my name is Bill Trost. I met Brad, I think it was in '94. I was on maybe my 3rd trip back to community college to pursue an art career, and at Palomar College here in San Diego, and saw a flyer that was interesting, like a physical flyer on a real bulletin board, not digital. One of those ones that people post, for a lost dog or a car. It literally had like the little pull tabs with the phone number on it, and it said something interesting. It was looking for artists, looking for people who love games, who want to make a game like Ultima. And I'm like, okay, this sounds awesome. This is my dream. And so I pulled one of those tabs and I called the number, and Brad answered and immediately set up a time for us to meet. And it was like a week later or whatever, and I show up at his house and it's full of people playing Magic, right? And we go into another room and he shows me War Wizard, which was the first game him and Steve and Milo Cooper had made, and he's like, see, we made this one, and now we're trying to make a sequel, War Wizard 2. It's going to be better. It's going to look like Ultima 6. It's going to be awesome. Met Kevin Burns on that day too, who's also here. And his room was full of comic books, as typical. And then of course he showed me his gun, which I was a little a little taken aback by he just bought some new rifle, and I was like, and it's totally not my personality, so I was like, this is what I'm getting into. But it didn't, as everybody said, his passion was there from the very beginning. He idolized Richard Garriott. He idolized the Ultimate Games. He desperately wanted to create games and create RPGs, especially like, we can fast forward, 2 years later or so when he hooked up with SMED and snuck everybody else in the back door because SMED didn't want to interview artists. That, even at that time, something that SMED touched on was like the industry in general was very down on RPGs in general, let alone an online game, a game, when people are using AOL to get on the internet, and then the bold choice to make the game require 3D hardware. Those were all like, and to especially after seeing the awesomeness that was Ultimate Online. We have Raph here. We all played, but also Brad was very committed to it being a cooperative game. That no, this is supposed to be a game about bringing people together to have grand adventures, not kill each other. And there were many arguments about that. There were lots of people on the team, even though we were a small team, we thought, no, what's the point of this if we can't kill each other? But, Brad was right, I think, ultimately, and those things that brought people together on that game. We were a small group and we were a family, and, we fought like a family, and we all had different opinions, and but Brad was the glue that stuck everybody together. Brad took a lot of chances on a bunch of, nobody on that team, well, relatively few people. Kevin McPherson, we brought on, he had a little bit of experience, but most people on that team had no game experience. And we just didn't know what we should try to make. And Brad dreamed big, and so we all went along for the ride. It was incredible. It impacted my life. My experience with Brad changed my life. I can't imagine what my life would be like if I had not pulled that tab off of that thing. And I can't tell you, a day doesn't go by that I don't run into somebody whose life was fundamentally changed because of this game that we all worked on. Including games themselves. There's not a game you can buy today that you can't point back to something in EverQuest as an influence. Like, all of these games are MMOs anymore, whether they call themselves MMOs or not. They all have the same types of things that excited Brad and that Brad demanded, had to be in this game. I regret that we didn't get to work together more often. Where our paths diverged after EverQuest 2, pretty much. But we kept in contact. Occasionally we would send each other text messages and things like that, and always kept tabs on what each other were doing, and it was, I'm gonna miss him. Like I said, his impact can't be overstated personally in my life, and obviously everybody else here, as well as the millions of people who were affected by his games, who met through his games, who married, had children because of his games. I still haven't met anybody who has a child named Fiona B yet. I kind of expected that by now. And if there is one of those, they could almost be 21 now. That's crazy. This kid, EverQuest can drink next year. I'm going to miss him. I think the industry is going to miss him. I look forward to seeing the vision that you guys put forth within Pantheon. And I think he will be remembered for sure. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name name is Seth Gillespie, and I met Brad in my high school years. And I did not have a car, but he did. So definitely giving gas money to go around to our first In-N-Out, where back in the day, the In-N-Outs weren't in San Diego, so we had to drive up to Los Angeles. And he told me, the fries aren't very good, but the burgers are excellent. And Brad was a friend. He was a brother. He was a mentor to me. I was about 4 or 5 years younger, so definitely I had a lot of great influences from him in my life, meeting all of his friends and seeing what he had become. Brad had a high school degree, and he was there by my side when I went to college and always interested in my success. Now I have a PhD, and I actually dedicated that to Brad and Steve Jobs. What I really liked about Brad is all the video games we used to play. Back then I had an Amiga 500, and he had Commodores and Amigas. I eventually went to the Macs, and he would always have me bring my Mac and a heavy CRT monitor over to his house so we could play Command and Conquer, and he would always beat my butt. So I don't know what it is about that genre, but he was really good. I really enjoyed the times we'd spent together. He was inspiration. He was married for 26 years, and that's a great testament and always a great example. He was family. His house was my house, and that's what he'd always say. And I got to spend so many years, Thanksgivings and Christmases, when I moved away and come back to town. He had a great big house with his family, and he would often forget where the extra key was. So I would learn which doors to keep unlocked. So if I had to go somewhere, I could get back in, because it was a giant house and get lost. And he extended that to my little brother, he's 21 now, Thomas. But I remember going down one of the long corridors late at night. He'd be so scared because it was such a big house. It's really dark. But those were some fun times, and I would skip him. I'd have a big one. But yeah, so back in those high school days, so friends of Brad, like Stacy, married my high school math teacher, and so that was always a bit weird, but it was all good. And then Milo, I would hang out at their apartment while they're making War Wizard. I always thought that was so great. Let's see, there's so many, the LAN parties, the big monitors, the sci-fi books. Roger Zelazny was a huge influence on him, and I got to read all those books.
Also his password, by the way.
Zelazny before So Brad also had a passion for cars, which was really cool. He upgraded from his Nissan Sentra, eventually got one of the re-releases of the MR2. Of course, there was the S2000. Then we get into the NSX, the RX-8, the RSX. Jeez, a lot of those. The RX-8 was a rotary, I think. I'm pretty sure about that. And the Ferraris, the Porsche. And so I've only attained to the Porsche level. So one day I'll get there. But yeah, Brad was great. Texting, asking him questions. He was a huge influence in my life, and I'll never forget him. I still think about him every day. Thanks.
All right, thanks, everyone. That's the end of the speakers that we had scheduled. So we have the room until 6, so feel free to grab a beer, reminisce about Brad, other stories. We're going to be around here. Anybody wants to talk, and make sure you sign the guest book and anything else that we have over here. But thanks everyone for coming.